Inspiring single dad saves beaten mother and child. Days later, incredible truth is revealed. The chill of autumn wrapped around Nate like an unwelcome shroud as he maneuvered the forklift through the warehouse, every motion dictated by the rhythm of necessity. He blinked against the dim light, stifling his fatigue. His painstaking hours at the job kept the lights on for him and Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, who waited alone at home. What could seemingly shatter their fragile equilibrium? His meager paycheck from the warehouse was only supplemented by a second job at the local gas station, 8 hours of coaxing fuel into tanks while adjusting to constant flickering fluorescent lights and churning motels full of tired travelers. Yet, every time he felt the heaviness of his exhaustion, Lily's laughter crept into his mind, urging him onward. She depended on him, and despite the constant ache in his bones, he pushed through. That evening, after a long, grueling shift, Nate's thoughts drifted to Lily as the clock ticked toward midnight. His heart tightened at the thought of her tucked away in bed, safe yet lonely. For a moment, he let himself imagine a life without relentless pressure, one filled with laughter and shared moments. But it was just a fleeting fantasy. Life had demands that left no room for dreams. Suddenly, a deafening crash pierced through the still night, yanking Nate from his reverie. He hastily parked the forklift and stepped outside, every instinct on high alert. The alleyway lay shadowy and cold, the amber light of the nearby street lamp casting odd shapes that loomed in the dark. In that moment, he caught sight of a haggard woman, face streaked with bruises, frantic as she fled with a small boy clinging to her. In a mere heartbeat, the flicker of empathy ignited a flame of resolve in him. The man she fled from stood like a dark sentinel, menacing and powerful, and something within Nate snapped. He had fought against shadows before, against the dark corners of his own childhood. With determination surging in his chest, he confronted the man, whose contempt met Nate's fierce gaze. "Back off," he demanded, a tremor in his voice that belied the quake coursing through him. With that, he ushered the woman and her child into his modest home, little more than 4 walls and a roof, but safe for now. He offered her simple hospitality, pouring out some lukewarm leftover chili, his hands trembling as he tried to stifle the urgency crowding his thoughts about his own financial volatility. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Nate's tired eyes caught the momentary spark of laughter shared between Lily and the woman's son as they attempted to ride a bike in the cramped backyard. For that fleeting instant, hope flickered anew. Yet, beneath it all, dread pulsed, leaving Nate grappling with increasing pressures. His bosses were breathing down his neck, demanding faster productivity, and he could still feel the shadow of the ex lurking near. An unwanted storm threatening to rip through the fragile life he'd just begun to cherish. Then came the revelations. As Sarah spoke of her past within the 4 walls of their makeshift family, Nate learned of an abusive ex whom intended to reclaim a legacy, the bakery that had once brought joy to their town. The weight of her struggle mirrored his own challenges, clawing at the edges of his resolve. But these discoveries played like a cruel melody in his mind, a reminder of the chaos threatening to unravel everything he was fighting to protect. His heart raced as another realization pierced through the confusion. A web of entangled pasts blurring the line between sacrifice and survival. With upward pressure building from his own life and Sarah's escalating danger, the clarity of his sacrifices weighed heavy. Would he stand firm against the ex, risking everything? And would the truth residing just beneath the surface pull both he and Sarah into an abyss they might never claw their way out of? As dusk settled again, shadows loomed larger than ever before, pressing Nate to confront what he was truly willing to lose. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow in the small living room, yet Nate felt a weight pressing down on him as he stirred awake. The remnants of last night's turmoil cluttered his mind. Sarah's revelation about her situation and the lurking threat of her ex echoed relentlessly. In the midst of his own precarious existence, what entered his heart was not just sympathy, but a palpable fear of the unknown consequences. As he sipped his coffee, Nate tried to piece together a plan. Should he encourage Sarah to return to the bakery? That had been her life, after all. Yet the thought ignited a conflict within him. What if doing so only exposed her further to the wrath of her abuser? His pulse quickened. The warehouse loomed in the back of his mind, along with the demands of his second job. His sense of urgency clashed against a need for caution. Lily bounded down the stairs, her face alight with energy. She tugged at his arm, urging him to come play outside with her and her new friend. With a forced smile, Nate followed them to the yard. Watching the children laughing, he felt a flicker of joy amidst the cloud hanging over him. Yet that joy was tinged with bitterness. Each laugh reminded him that he had little time for such fleeting moments. Life had become a series of demands that left little room for happiness. As the sun rose higher, Nate's thoughts turned to his own role in this unfolding drama. He could stay a bystander or step into a fight, not just for Sarah, but for a sense of purpose that had long eluded him. The idea of confronting her ex sent a shiver through his spine, but perhaps it was that very fear he intended to challenge about himself. Would he choose to advocate for her, even if it meant risking his own safety, or would he retreat into his shell, sacrificing another piece of his integrity? Nate paced around the yard, watching Lily and the boy pedal away on the bike. In that moment, he realized it wasn't just about providing for his daughter anymore. It was about modeling courage and compassion. Could he bear the weight of protecting not just his own child, but another family that had come into their lives, albeit in such chaotic circumstances? When spare moments of solitude crept in, Nate's internal conversation shifted to something deeper. He thought of the bruises on Sarah's skin, the agonizing details she had shared, and most importantly, the resilience within her fight for a life worth living. It ignited something long dormant inside him, a recollection of when he had worked for a community organization, mentoring young fathers and standing against domestic violence through community events. Suddenly, a thought crystallized in Nate's mind. Perhaps he didn't just have to be a passive participant. Surely he had learned valuable skills during his time as a mentor, skills he had neglected in his daily grind. A plan began to take shape, centered around community connection and active support. Reinventing himself as more than just a worker, he could be a true protector. Nate felt a tentative surge of determination rise within him. He would not only advocate for Sarah, but also refuse to let fear dictate his choices. The weight of responsibility had shaped him into a man of resilience, and now it would define his new path forward. As the morning faded into noon, Nate resolved to take action. He'd confront her ex and begin to devise a way to support Sarah in reclaiming her bakery, her legacy. There was so much at stake. But just as he turned back toward the house, an unexpected knock echoed through the front door, jolting him instantly. The looming anxiety returned as he approached the door, each step echoing the urgent beat of his heart. What awaited him on the other side? Could this be the moment when everything changed? The urgency of the unknown gripped him once more. The time had come not just to face threats, but to actively reshape the course of his life and others. Nate steadied himself before the door, breath hitching as he grappled with the unknown. The weight of his decision loomed heavier than ever, each knock a constant reminder that the fragile balance of their lives was teetering on the edge. Who could it be? As his mind spiraled, he imagined 10 scenarios, each more dire than the last. With a determined breath, he pulled the door open, his heart racing. The cool breeze that rushed in felt alien against the tension surrounding him, releasing a hint of stale fear that had clung to him. On the other side stood a figure from his past, Daniel, an old colleague from his mentoring days. The surprise mingled with an instinctual wariness. "Nate, I've been trying to reach you," Daniel said, urgency painting his features. "Why are you here?" Nate asked, scanning for signs of trouble behind Daniel's friendly facade. "I heard about Sarah's situation," Daniel replied, stepping into the living room. "You've got to know that what you're considering, confronting her ex, it's dangerous. I can help." Nate's mind raced. Where had the charity mentor gone, the person who had once commanded respect and inspired others? All he saw now was a man weighed down by the echoes of mediocrity. "And do what, exactly?" Nate shot back, his voice sharper than he intended. "I understand your hesitations," Daniel said, calmly, shifting gears. "But I know resources, counselors, legal aid, people who can give her strength. You can't fight this battle without backup." Nate's mind raced. Where had the charity mentor gone, the person who had once commanded respect and inspired others? All he saw now was a man weighed down by the echoes of mediocrity. "And do what, exactly?" Nate shot back, his voice sharper than he intended. "I understand your hesitations," Daniel said, calmly, shifting gears. "But I know resources, counselors, legal aid, people who can give her strength. You can't fight this battle without backup." The words rang true, yet Nate felt corners of his resolve buckling. He had spent years as the protector, the resilient one, only to find himself teetering on the verge of vulnerability. "If I gather a team, what's next?" he asked, wrestling with the profound implications. "Nate, you can't be her only hope. Protecting Sarah is important, but you must also consider Lily. This situation isn't just about you and Sarah. It involves everything you hold dear," Daniel pressed, concern etched into his expression. Nate rubbed his temples, the undeniable responsibilities caving in. Daniel was right. If he failed, he could jeopardize not only Sarah's safety, but Lily's emotional stability as well. It angered him, the weight of it all, yet something in his gut stirred. Was it desperation or clarity? Perhaps both. A plan formed in Nate's mind, a multi-tiered approach. Moving in tandem with Daniel meant navigating legal waters while leveraging their combined networks to ensure Sarah wasn't just another statistic. This was an opportunity to resurrect the mentorship he once thrived on, pulling him from the downward spiral of mundane survival. Taking a moment to collect himself, Nate nodded. "Okay, let's do this. We'll reach out to whoever we need, but I'm not shying away from this confrontation. She deserves to feel safe." Daniel's brows raised in a mix of respect and concern. "You really mean that?" "More than ever," Nate replied, a quiet fire igniting within him. He recalled the strength Sarah had shown, reminding him that courage could be infectious, or, alternatively, a stark missing component in someone's life. As they strategized, listing contacts and formulating approaches, Nate felt the surge of purpose coursing through him. Each name was a lifeline, a bridge to hope for Sarah. They'd need to tread carefully, not just for her, but also for Lily, who remained blissfully unaware of the darker currents swirling nearby. Yet amidst the newfound resolve came a creeping doubt. What if they pulled the strings only to expose them all further? Could Nate's intentions spiral into something unforgivable? While the list grew, his internal narrative became more complex. The specter of fear nestled close, whispering hesitations. The true confrontation loomed ahead, not just with an abuser, but also within himself. A dawning awareness that strength was as much about calculated caution as it was about martial bravado. As Nate prepared to step forward with newfound allies, two questions haunted him. How deeply would he have to delve into his past to protect Sarah? And at what cost would his machinations manifest? The door remained ajar, the world outside unyielding in its uncertainty. What awaited them on the horizon? Perhaps danger, perhaps a revelation about himself, or maybe both. The moment had come to face choices that would ripple through every facet of their futures. Would he manage to protect them from the storm he was about to unleash? Or would he summon a darkness that threatened to consume everything he cared for? Nate leaned back against the wall, his mind racing with the implications of Daniel's presence. Conversations about plans and strategies took on a life of their own, swirling around him, yet he felt an unsettling disconnection. He'd spent years coding his instincts to remain solid and unyielding, but with Sarah's impending crisis drawing closer, he realized that rigidity might not serve him in this battle. "All right, we need to focus on immediate actions," Nate said, shaking off the mental fog. "What's our first step?" Daniel nodded, the urgency unwavering. "We start with consulting a lawyer. I have a contact who specializes in domestic cases. We'll also find a support group for Sarah. She needs more than just legal advice. Emotional support is crucial." Nate's heart ached at the thought of Sarah's struggle. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, but also an alarming awareness that he couldn't shoulder every burden. The weight of his ambition began to shift from the pursuit of stoic protection to a pursuit of solidarity. "Do you think she's ready for that?" he asked softly, the concern leaning more towards personal than professional. Daniel's eyes met his fiercely. "Better to initiate now than wait until it's too late. You know how these cycles work. They'll only tighten unless we intervene. She needs to realize her worth again." Nate inhaled deeply, envisioning the layers of her despair. He recalled every moment he had seen her flinch, the quiet defeats hidden behind false smiles. It was as though he had known all along that self-worth wasn't merely a feeling, but a fortress against fear. But now, wasn't that fortress crumbling? He opened his laptop and began typing, suddenly aware of the urgency to harness the resources available to him. But as he pored over potential contacts and strategies, the looming shadow of uncertainty crept back in, whispering reassurances that he would fail in this venture too. "Stop doubting yourself," Daniel urged, his voice cutting through Nate's spiraling thoughts. "You're not the same person you were when you first entered that mentoring program. You've grown into someone who knows the stakes. Trust that knowledge." Just that simple acknowledgement rekindled Nate's confidence. The memory of his early days in mentoring surged forth. The thrill of guiding others, the triumphs of witnessing their successes. Perhaps his isolation had distorted those experiences. Maybe the insights he'd gained were precisely what he needed to drive this endeavor forward. "All right, let's get to it," he declared, hands now steady over the keyboard. The rapid strokes of his fingers echoed the resolve burgeoning within him. As the list formed, a mix of legal contacts, support groups, and safety resources, Nate found hope intertwining with the fear, pulling him toward action. Yet, as momentum gained, he realized that confrontation with Sarah's ex would also require a different confrontation within himself. What kind of ally would he be if he were merely acting out of fear? And more importantly, what would this cost him? His mind lingered on Lily, the innocent child who had no idea of the storm brewing around her, unaware of the sacrifices her father might make for someone else's freedom. "Next, we'll meet with Sarah. Convince her to trust us," Daniel said, as if reading his turmoil. "You need to lead her to that space she's afraid to walk into." Nate swallowed hard, wrestling with unease. He had to push past the unmanageable trepidation that kept rattling his insides. Could he step into the role of a leader again, or would the remnants of a past failure haunt him, disabling his ability to make a positive impact? "Together, then," Nate said finally, his voice taut with resolve. "We're in this together." But as the decision settled within him, a sense of foreboding loomed larger than before. What if their good intentions spiraled into something unforeseen? How would they suppress the impending storm? The complexity of the coming confrontation weighed heavily on his mind. As he prepared himself for the meeting with Sarah, a gnawing thought echoed within him. Would his actions serve true justice, or would they unleash deeper shadows that could fracture the very relationships he sought to protect? Questions hung in the air, as precarious as the journey ahead. The path to safety was shrouded in mystery, and Nate couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper he ventured into this fight, the more secrets, both external and internal, would claw their way to the surface. What truths remained buried within him, and how would they shape the future he was trying so desperately to build? Nate stood at the entrance of the coffee shop where he and Sarah had agreed to meet. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversation filled the air, but he felt muffled, detached from the environment around him. It was almost as if the world had drawn back its vibrancy, leaving him to grapple with the weight of his own apprehensions. Daniel had gone ahead to secure a table, leaving Nate alone with his turbulent thoughts. What if Sarah rejected their proposal? What if she was too deep in her own despair to recognize the lifeline being extended? Each possibility felt like a stone in his stomach. As he paced, he couldn't help but reflect on his ability to influence outcomes, a skill he had cultivated through years of working with vulnerable individuals. Why then did it feel so vital yet so distant now? Shaking off the doubt, he focused on the mission. Sarah needed to be reminded of her worth. He had a responsibility not only to guide her through the legal labyrinth, but also to reignite the flickering flame of self-belief she had long extinguished. Nate recalled Daniel's words, "Trust that knowledge." Leaning into that, he briefly checked the documents he had uploaded onto his laptop. Legal resources, support groups, contacts. Everything strategically outlined, yet it felt like a facade masking a greater truth, his own fear of failure. The bell over the door jingled, drawing Nate's attention. Sarah entered, looking momentarily lost amidst the bustling cafe. Her eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on him, the expression morphing her features reminded Nate of how decisive this moment would be. Their shared history was a tapestry of unspoken challenges, woven tightly with moments of hope and despair. "Hey," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the noise. "Hey," he replied, his throat dry as he motioned her to sit. "Nate, she began, her voice trailing off as if caught in an invisible web. "Let's get right to it," he encouraged, leaning forward slightly. "We need to talk about what's happening, and then how we can help you." Her hesitation morphed into a visible internal battle. Nate could see her wrestling with the past, the present, and the dizzying uncertainty of the future. "I don't know if I can do this. What if it only makes things worse?" The depth of her fragility struck Nate hard, igniting a determination within him. Worse is already happening. We can't wait for the perfect moment for things to change. We need to act now. His conviction spilled into the space between them, a commitment to both protect and empower her despite the uncertain terrain ahead. When a flicker of recognition sparked in Sarah's eyes, a question collided in Nate's mind. Was this just a fleeting moment of clarity or the beginning of her awakening? He wasn't just offering a lifeline, he was extending a challenge to her spirit. "We can find you a lawyer. I have resources that will support you emotionally, too." Sarah's fingers fidgeted with her bracelet, a nervous habit that spoke volumes. "I don't know how to trust again. Not after everything, when I needed someone the most." Nate felt the weight of her words pressing against him, a mirror reflecting his own fears regarding vulnerability. "I get it, but trust isn't built overnight. It's a step-by-step journey. I'm not asking you to leap. I'm asking you to take that first step with us." The seriousness in her gaze deepened. What if taking that step leads to even greater pain? Her raw honesty prompted Nate to question the cost of their actions. What sacrifices would come from their fight for her freedom? It may, but it's pain that leads to growth. Together, we can mitigate the damage, not just survive. Something shifted in the air, a tangible resolve beginning to brew. Well, I don't really know where to start, she admitted, her voice steadier now, a small ember of hope igniting. Nate smiled, the shift in her demeanor sending sparks of possibility coursing through him. Let's figure it out together. But as they began crafting a plan, shadows from Nate's past lurked at the edges of his thoughts. Would he be strong enough to keep them both safe amidst the swirling chaos? And what if his definitive choices stirred up old demons he thought were long buried? As they exchanged potential first steps, that simmering sense of foreboding elongated into a relentless whisper. The time to face his fears was drawing nearer. Would he confront the decision rooted in sacrifice, or would a flicker of cowardice sabotage this new path? Their shared journey was only just beginning, and yet Nate could sense the looming threat of a confrontation that could change everything. The stakes were rising. Nate leaned in closer, the warmth of urgency igniting between him and Sarah as they sketched out the framework for her revival. In that moment, her vulnerability became a powerful force, propelling him further into action. The cafe's ambient noise faded as he navigated the intricacies of her situation, transforming raw emotion into strategic dialogue. "What's your first priority?" he asked, wrestling through the layers of trauma to reach the core of her concerns. I want to feel safe," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the clatter of cups. Nate's heart twisted. This was not merely a legal battle, it was an existential fight for Sarah's dignity. He felt a swell of responsibility enveloping him, demanding he channeled his energies into something constructive. "Let's prioritize your immediate safety. I can help you identify resources like shelters and legal aid." As the conversation burrowed deeper into defining steps, Nate noticed how Sarah's demeanor began to shift. With every suggestion he put forth, the flickering ember of hope within her seemed to glow brighter. She nodded slowly, contemplating the possibilities, and he followed her lead into a territory where courage could blossom. In her eyes, he saw reflections of his own past, a time when he had faced insurmountable odds with a heart laden with fear. It was exhilarating and terrifying to see that fighting spirit mirrored back at him. "You're stronger than you think," he assured her, and he meant it. His voice was now layered with conviction. What had once felt like an insubstantial lifeline was metamorphosing into a solid thread, connecting them in shared resolve. The more he articulated a path forward, the more he felt himself evolve into a catalyst for change, not only for Sarah, but for himself as well. Yet beneath this emerging confidence roiled a disquiet that Nate could not shake. In guiding Sarah, he couldn't ignore the unsettling realization that he was also confronting his own shadows. Each time she hesitated, mistrusted her instincts, or recoiled from a potential path forward, it echoed his own long-dormant fears. As Sarah grappled with her decisions, Nate recognized that he was revisiting the consequences of his own choices, decisions that had led him down a path of self-denial. "What stood in your way before?" he pressed, determined to unearth the roots of her fear. She sighed heavily, eyes flickering as she braced herself for a painful recollection. "Trusting people. I thought they'd be there for me, but—" Her voice trembled, and Nate's heart ached for the trauma she had endured. "It's okay," he said, lowering his tone to a soothing cadence. "But that's part of what we're addressing now. You need to trust that we can do this together." Gradually, she nodded, letting her guard down. But the moment was not without its challenges. While Sarah began to gain small victories, Nate felt a gnawing anxiety burgeoning within him. How much longer until he was forced to confront his own neglected fears? As they drafted a tentative plan, detailing calls and meetings, strategizing immediate steps, Nate could sense the precipice beneath him widening. Each commitment he made felt significant, yet he could not ignore the hollow thrum of impending confrontation. After the meeting, as they stood to leave, Sarah hesitated, looking directly into Nate's eyes. "Can I rely on you, Nate?" The question held the weight of her vulnerability, a demand for steadfastness that felt monumental. Could he really be the anchor in both their storms? Absolutely, he vowed, but the conviction felt fragile. With the cafe fading behind them, Nate hoped Sarah's first step toward reclaiming her life could also become his transformative moment. Maybe in guiding her, he would finally discover the strength he had long sought. Yet there still lurked uncertainties. Old ghosts danced at the edge of thought, echoing doubts about his own capacity to be the man he wished to become. As they traversed the path ahead, Nate felt the shadows of his past begin to stir ominously. The time for confrontation was approaching, and he would need to reconcile his growing fears within. Would he dare not only to lead, but also to face the reckoning of his own decisions? The answer, he realized, awaited him just around the corner, ready to demand the truth behind both their journeys. With each step away from the cafe, Nate felt the weight of Sarah's reliance on him settle heavily on his shoulders. She needed him to be a firm foundation, yet the ground beneath him felt shaky, like sand shifting underfoot. The internal struggle chewed at his confidence, gnawing on the edges of the resolve he had just begun to cultivate. In his car, he pulled the ignition and stared through the windshield into the gridlock ahead, lost in thought. He couldn't shake the sensation that their paths were intersecting for a profound reason. Hadn't he been here before, pushing forward with a brave face while fear trickled down his spine, whispering doubts that only he could hear? This was a new chapter, one that stripped away the facades he had carefully crafted. Driving to his office, he replayed their conversation in his mind. Her longing for safety had struck him deep. It was a reminder of his own childhood instability. Absent parents had left him grappling with feelings of abandonment and distrust during formative years. He had crafted a shell around himself, a self-imposed barrier against further hurt. Yet, in creating a distance, he had also severed himself from the warmth of authentic connection. Arriving at his workspace, Nate noticed a flurry of activity. Colleagues mingled, laughter punctuating the air, a stark contrast to his swirling doubts. He found a quiet corner and pulled out the notes from their meeting, his thoughts rapidly filling with strategy. The plans had to become actionable items. If he could foster this new determination in Sarah, perhaps it could solidify the path he had often skated around in his own life. As he drafted legal outlines for her, however, the gnawing sense of inadequacy clawed at him. "What am I doing?" he muttered under his breath. It was not only about the specifications of law, but also the emotional gears that would keep the machinery of Sarah's recovery well-oiled. Clarity in those mechanics eluded him, and he found himself at a dual crossroad, striking out to help her while confronting his demons. Thoughts of Sarah's fear replayed in his mind. Trust, wasn't it his struggle too? Each memory, each moment of betrayal loomed, compounded by his uncertainty about how much faith he placed in himself. Could he even be the man he wished to model for Sarah and her child? He typed quickly, breaking through the haze, spilling the strategies onto paper. Yet each stroke of the keyboard punctuated an insistent truth. Guiding Sarah meant he had to unearth the buried parts of himself, lay bare his vulnerability. Who was he without the pretense of competency? As the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across his desk, Nate realized he was moving toward a reckoning. The clock's hands crept toward the evening, nudging him closer to their next meeting. He felt it, a pressure to confront the realities of his past, not only for his growth, but as a lesson for Sarah. They required the grace of honesty and bravery, or their journey would languish in the failures of unacknowledged fear. Finally, he looked up, breath steadying as the clock hands seemed to urge him on. He committed to accepting whatever would emerge in their next conversation, ready to wield transparency like a shield. It was time to confront the darkness that had shrouded his choices, to ensure he could not only be a guide, but also reveal his own struggles. After all, How could he ask Sarah to step into her fears unless he stepped into his? As he packed his things to leave, determination ignited within him. He owed it to both of them to clarify what lay beneath the surface. With a deep breath, he resolved to face his past directly when they met again. Yet, as he drove away from the office, the question lingered. Was he truly prepared to do so? And what revelations would surface once he did? The anticipation loomed like a storm cloud above, threatening to unleash a rain of clarity or chaos in equal measure. The moment Nate stepped into the sunny coffee shop, he felt a twitch of anxiety creep up his spine again. The lively atmosphere buzzed with laughter and conversation, but all he could hear were the echoes of his internal turmoil. Today was crucial. He needed to be present, both for Sarah and for himself. The stakes were high, and he had decided to lay bare his vulnerabilities, a daunting prospect that sent a jolt of self-doubt through him. He spotted Sarah at their usual corner table, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. The professional barriers he had constructed were poised to come crashing down. As he approached, he grappled with a sudden urge to retreat back to his carefully built fortress of emotional detachment. But he inhaled deeply, reminding himself that their connection was about to evolve, if he allowed it. "Hey," he greeted, forcing a steady smile as he settled into the seat across from her. "Are you ready to talk?" There it was, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "I want to," she hesitated, a stress line framing her brow, as if she were balancing the weight of an unspoken disaster. "Just say it." He emphasized softness, wanting her to see he meant it, even in his discomfort. What was lurking behind her hesitation seemed like a mirror to his own trepidation. What if I'm not strong enough? The question hung between them, heavy with unacknowledged desperation. Nate felt his breath catch, a pang of recognition crashing over him. "What if we aren't?" he countered gently. "But that's why we're here, together." Lifting her gaze, she seemed to search for something in his eyes. Was it assurance? Understanding? He wasn't sure, but he knew he had to ignite that trust within her, and in doing so, explore his own fears. "I've never let anyone in, Nate," she finally admitted, a tear spilling over before she could blink it away. "I don't know how to share. I don't know how to trust." The confession unwrapped a layer of the armor he'd wrapped tightly around his heart. "Believe. I understand," he said, his voice lowering, "but I want to be that person you can trust." The walls he had built, meticulously fortified, began to crack open, allowing his own vulnerabilities to seep through. For moments, they exchanged silence, letting the weight of their shared fears settle. Nate was acutely aware now that by reaching for her, he was also reaching for the pieces of himself he had hidden away. Stepping into this vulnerability felt like staring down a gaping abyss, yet within him a flicker of hope ignited. "Let's start small then," he proposed, summoning his resolve. "What if you tell me one thing that scares you? I'll share too." She hesitated, drawing in a breath laden with trepidation. "I'm afraid of failing, of being a bad mother." Nate nodded, feeling painfully similar emotions race to the forefront of his mind. A distant reminder of his own parental fears and failures, drowning in his childhood memories. "I fear I'll never be good enough, at work, at home, anywhere," he revealed, the admission fierce yet liberating. A flicker of understanding passed through Sarah's eyes. "Why does it make me feel better to hear you say that?" "Because we're becoming real," Nate responded, a note of fervor creeping into his words. "It's scary, but it's the first step." As they shared more, the process became less burdensome. Each revelation peeled away layers of guardedness, stitching them closer together. It wasn't just about saving her and the child. It was about dismantling the patterns shackling him, too. Hours slipped by, and as the sun dipped lower, Nate realized they had built a tentative bridge of trust. Weekend plans unfolded, goals were discussed. For the first time, he sensed a glimpse of a shared future, one woven with honesty. However, looming in the shadows was the undeniable truth that wrestling with their fears was just the beginning. Then, when the conversation had reached its peak, Sarah's unanticipated silence enveloped them. Her eyes fell, an unreadable weight settling onto her shoulders. "Nate, there's something I haven't told you," she whispered, and Nate's heart pounded instinctively. The moment of truth had arrived. Nate braced himself for Sarah's revelation, his heart racing as he sensed the shift in her demeanor. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily in the air, and he fought against the urge to fill the silence with anxious chatter. He needed to remain grounded, to be the calming force she desperately needed. "Whatever it is, you can tell me," he encouraged, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. A flicker of fear danced in her eyes, and her fingers trembled as they toyed with the edge of the table. "It's just complicated," she began, her voice wavering. Nate leaned forward, captivated by the vulnerability shimmering in her gaze. "I can handle complicated. Just give me the truth," he urged, his own voice steadying as he shifted his focus to support her. With a deep breath, Sarah finally spoke. "My ex hasn't just been distant. He can be dangerous." The confession tumbled out, raw and jagged. The walls that Nate had just begun to dismantle entangled themselves around him again, tightening with the shroud of uncertainty. "Dangerous how?" he pressed, instinctively crossing his arms as if to shield himself from the dread that surged within him. "He struggles with substance abuse, and there have been times I felt afraid for my safety and for the baby." Her voice faltered steadily, the impact of her words hitting Nate like a disorienting blow. His mind raced. Facing the implications meant confronting fears he thought he had sidelined. "What are you saying? Are you in danger right now?" The urgent concern made it more apparent. Nate had taken steps forward only to find himself standing at the precipice of her chaos. Yanking the curtain of her pain aside required a courage that swelled within him. Yet this revelation was about more than Sarah's past. It forced him to reflect on his own childhood. His father, a shadow of a man defeated by addiction, loomed ominously in his memories. Those experiences whispered insecurities, questioning his aptitude to guide another through perilous shadows. "I'm trying to keep us safe until I can figure it out," she whispered, eyes swimming with unshed tears. In that moment, Nate knew the journey wasn't solely about offering her support. It was about understanding how deeply rooted fears affected him, too. The resolve he had fought to build was becoming a foundation for their evolving connection, but it was not enough. "All right," he said, a cautious determination surfacing in his words. "But we have to act. We can't let fear dictate our lives." "Will you really help?" she asked, her eyes boring into him, seeking a promise. There was an unspoken ultimatum hanging in the balance, a plea woven through the chaotic fabric of uncertainty. Nate's chest tightened, but he nodded firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes. We have to protect you and the baby." As they mapped out a tentative plan to address her situation, Nate felt something shift within him. The clarity of purpose unveiled a part of himself he had kept hidden. He was envisioning a path, not just for her, but for them both. However, fear coiled around him once again, urging him to question whether he had the strength to see this through. Would he falter under the weight of new responsibilities? The echoes of doubt hung eerily as they sorted logistics and potential outcomes. With each decision they made, he felt the confidence return, like a fire being stoked. Then Sarah paused, a new depth creeping in as she murmured, "Nate, there's still something more." Deep down, Nate knew that revelation would either cement their emerging bond or threaten to dismantle their newfound trust. The impending truth loomed, ready to reshape everything he thought he knew about their situation. Nate sat across from Sarah. Every word she was about to speak weighed heavily in the air, like a dense fog. In the newly forged bond of trust they were constructing together, he could feel it crackling with potential energy, both incredible and terrifying. Their exchange had begun to feel like a dance, teetering on the knife's edge of vulnerability, and he braced himself for her next revelation. "Growing up, I didn't get any support either," Sarah finally admitted, her voice soft yet unwavering. "My father was like your ex, addicted and volatile. I thought I could avoid that life, but here I am, facing it again." Her admission struck Nate with an unexpected duality. It resonated with his own experiences while simultaneously deepening the connection they were forging. The truth hung palpable in the cafe air, intertwining their haunted pasts. "You're not defined by your past," Nate said firmly, a newfound sense of authority lacing his commitment. "We can break these cycles together." In that moment, he recognized that pulling Sarah out of the depths didn't just require strength. It required illuminating pathways toward resilience that he too had to be willing to pursue. His own father's failures had cast shadows not just over his childhood, but over the very fabric of his present. Seeing Sarah grapple with similar demons was an opportunity to dismantle the walls he had constructed. "I know that now," Sarah said, her eyes shimmering with resilience, "but I need to believe it in my bones." "Then let's start building that belief right now," Nate replied, determination coursing through him. They sketched out strategies to protect her and her child from the threats lingering in the shadows, plans that tethered their vulnerabilities securely to hope. He saw the shift within her, the flicker of defiance taking root, the recognition that they could forge their own future. With each actionable plan they outlined, Nate felt the weight of his own fears begin to lift. In becoming a catalyst for Sarah's transformation, he was consolidating his own spirit. He recalled the exhilaration of mentoring he had once experienced. It was coursing through him again, only this was deeper, more personal, and ultimately redefined his role in their intertwined fates. As they prepared to meet with legal resources and secure support systems, Nate felt anticipation building within him. He was no longer the burdened father laboring under shadows of self-doubt. No, he was evolving into a man who would actively foster change, not just as a protector, but as a partner in growth. The next week flew by in a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and shared conversations. Watching Sarah step more assertively into her new identity was a revelation. She shaped her destiny within their collective struggle. He admired her gaining confidence, fiercely claiming pieces of herself that had lingered in doubt for far too long. In a pivotal moment, as they celebrated a small victory, securing legal representation for her, they sat outside the cafe, warmth of the day wrapping around them lightly. Nate turned to her, pride swelling within. "You've done really well. You should be proud." Sarah smiled, the brightness in her eyes now radiating an unmistakable glow. "I couldn't have done it without you." The simplicity of her gratitude stirred something within him. Not only had he been an anchor for her during the storm, but he realized he was also reshaping his own self-image. Each gesture of courage from her was resurrecting long-dormant threads of resilience within him. Yet a quiet reminder lingered. What awaited them beyond these small victories? With their plans finally starting to take shape, Nate couldn't shake the looming confrontation with her ex. It was only a matter of time before the storm they were navigating would meet with the very origin of their turmoil. Fear flickered in his gut, an echo of doubts. Had he truly prepared for the fight ahead? As they drove through town, mapping out the next steps, Nate's resolve crystallized more firmly. He was no longer merely a tired, overworked father trapped in the cycles of survival. He was equipped with knowledge and empathy, ready to face whatever turbulence awaited. Determined now, he took a deep breath. "Once we confront your ex, we'll shape our own narrative. We'll become more than what's happened to us." The words hung between them, filled with everything they had journeyed through together. the collective pain and the emerging strength. He could finally see it, a narrative unfolding that would allow both Sarah and himself to achieve true independence beyond the confines of their pasts. Soon, the time to confront the darkness would arrive, but when it did, they would be prepared. Nate could feel the power of transformation surge within him, a sense of competence. In embracing this newfound role, he had conquered not only his fears, but also the shadows that had stalked him for so long. As Nate pulled into a parking space, he realized the ultimate challenge lay ahead. The anticipated confrontation would either propel them forward or hurl them back into the dark. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Standing together outside the entrance, Nate looked towards Sarah, resolute in his commitment to not only navigate the unknown, but to reclaim what had been lost. They were walking forward, together, facing whatever storms awaited, not as victims, but as fierce survivors, ready to write their own powerful story of resilience. Now is your moment to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you to face your own battles. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure others can find their way to stories of triumph and growth. Your support makes a difference. Comment below to share your reactions and theories about these powerful transformations. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread this message of hope. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.